Hello, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International. Good evening, CJ. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Good evening, Alma, and good evening to everyone joining the broadcast. Here are tonight's headlines.
A huge wildfire tearing through Northern California became the third largest in the state's history and looks set to continue growing.
The Taliban capture a second Afghan provincial capital within 24 hours of taking their first, as government forces desperately try to defend a string of other cities from an insurgent takeover.
Thai police fired tear gas and rubber bullets at hundreds of protesters in Bangkok, demanding political reform and calling for a change to the country's vaccination program.
And Philippine boxer Carlo Paalam lost his Olympic boxing final on Saturday, but said he still treasured his silver medal because the recycled material reminded him how far he has come since his days as a scavenger.
A huge wildfire tearing through Northern California became the third largest in the state's history today and looks set to continue growing. Scary, intense. Evacuated Chester residents describe fleeing their home as the Dixie Fire continues to grow. Take a look.
It was scary. It was scary, especially going through all the construction that was on the road and seeing all of the official cars going in the opposite direction, just flying past us, and the buses, and it was scary.
Oh, it very intense. For quite a few nights, we could see the red coming over the hill, the glow of the fire. It was intense. It was a monster. It truly is.
It was all right. The sheriff's department was there, and they talked to me, and I told them everybody's out. We're getting ready to pull out, and the house is all locked up. And they said thank you, and then they took off. So, I mean, I hated to leave, but when they have to literally tell you have to go, I guess it's time to go.
At 322,000 acres, the Dixie Fire is now the size of Los Angeles and the sixth largest fire in California history. Plumas County Sheriff Todd Johns, who is helping to coordinate the fight against the fire, said the destruction was devastating. And firefighters on a new threat. The growing river fire is burning in an area that hasn't seen flames in 100 years. A long-term drought that scientists say is driven by climate change has left the western U.S. parched and vulnerable to explosive and highly destructive fires. By late July, the number of acres burned in California was up more than 250% from 2020, itself the worst year of wildfires in the state's modern history. The Dixie Fire has evoked painful memories of the Paradise Fire, the deadliest blaze in California's recent history. Faulty power lines sparked that inferno, which swept through the northern town of Paradise in 2018, killing 86 people. Pacific Gas and Electric, California's largest energy utility firm, was deemed responsible. PGE equipment is again being blamed for this Dixie Fire after a tree fell on a power conductor the day the blaze began. The utility announced in late July it will bury 10,000 miles of power lines in a massive bid to prevent its equipment from igniting more deadly wildfires.
Meanwhile, in Greece, the country is now facing an unprecedented environmental crisis, and officials there said wildfires raging in the country have claimed their first 2 lives. We have Tristan Regino joining us live from Greece. Tristan, what can you tell us?
Greece, like much of the fires raging in Greece, claimed their first 2 lives on Friday during a heat wave that officials said had turned the country into a powder keg. Local residents are also trying to put out wildfires as they reach the first houses in Cleoneri town, just north of Athens. Let's listen in.
Δεν φεύγω, έχω διώξει τα παιδιά, δεν φεύγω. Ό,τι μπορέσουμε. Ό,τι μπορέσουμε, παιδιά. Εντάξει, είναι μια ζωή, δεν μπορείς να τα αφήσεις. Εγώ τουλάχιστον δεν φεύγω, Βάσο. Δεν φεύγω από εδώ. Τουλάχιστον όσο μπορώ, όσο αντέξω. Δεν φεύγω, είμαι από χθες εδώ. Και ο άντρας μου δεν ξέρω, είναι στη φωτιά, τον έχουν στείλει αλλού γιατί είναι στην πυρασφάλεια. Δεν φεύγω από εδώ. Ό,τι γίνει.
Αλέξανδρε!
A 38-year-old man from Hippocratio, a town north of Athens, was hit by giant flames, died in hospital on Friday after being hit by a falling electric pole as he was riding a moped, according to the health ministry. The other victim was the president of the Athens Chamber of Commerce, Konstantinos Mikalos. He was found unconscious in a factory close to where a fire was raging. A further 20 people have been injured. Today also, thousands of tourists and residents were evacuated and a thick cloud of smoke and ash hung over Athens. Thousands of people have been ordered to leave their homes. Fanned by unpredictable winds, the worst blazes are around the north of Athens, really. The air in northern Athens is full of the smell of smoke. Media also reported that there is a thin layer of ash on the ground. Greece, like much of the rest of Europe, has been grappling with extreme weather this summer. Authorities said the blazes are set to continue with strong winds and temperatures of up to 38 degrees Celsius or 100 degrees Fahrenheit forecast in some regions today. Thank you, CJ. I'm Tristan Regino, reporting live from Athens, Greece, and we live in interesting times.
Thank you, Tristan.
All right, Bob Ward, the policy director at the Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change at the London School of Economics, explained that the increase in wildfires currently raging across Europe and other regions are a consequence of climate change and that they will be more frequent and more intense for at least the next 30 years. Take a look.
The Earth is warming, and that means periods of hot weather are becoming more intense and more frequent, and that leads to faster evaporation of water, which dries out vegetation, increasing the risks of wildfire. And we're seeing wildfire seasons becoming longer and more intense all around the world. Wildfire is a natural part of renewal in forests, but what we're seeing are areas of forest burning much more than in the past, and we're seeing areas such as in Siberia now exposed to much longer periods when fire is a real risk, and that's going to increase. We see more northerly and more southerly areas, which we traditionally think of as being rather cold, burning more often. Summers are going to become increasingly risky for people, particularly anybody who's living near forested areas, and we need much stronger regulations to stop people building in areas that are prone to wildfires. Climate change is increasing the risk of wildfire, and the conditions are going to get worse for at least the next 30 years, because climate change will only stop when the world gets to net zero emissions of greenhouse gases, and the earliest date that countries are discussing is 2050. So we have 3 decades of worsening wildfire risk. People can see the damage that's being caused by extreme weather events, including wildfires, and I think that they recognize that it's here now, it's not some distant threat. That will mean that they are putting more pressure on governments to act more strongly.
The Philippines reported 11,021 new cases of COVID-19 today, and the highest reported so far this August, according to the Department of Health. This now puts the total number of infections at 1.649 million, 76,063 of which are active. Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeire warned that the highly infectious Delta variant will push cases in the country even higher. Take a look.
Yes po, Yusek Rocky, no? So nakikita na ho nating sumisipa na ang mga kaso. Tumataas na po ang kaso, nararamdaman na po natin ang epekto ng Delta variant dito po sa ating bansa. At amin pong nakikita, based also on projections, natataas pa rin po ang mga kasong ito. Ito pong ginagawa natin ngayong paghihigpit ng mga quarantine restrictions or classifications ay ang ating adhikain dyan is to delay further increase, pero hindi niyan patitigilin. Tutuloy pa rin ang pagtaas, pero ang atin pong ginagawa ngayon is to prepare our system for this continuous increase in the number of cases. We had been hammering on the different response processes na ginagawa natin sa ngayon. We are now expanding beds in the different facilities across the country. Pinadadagdagan po natin ang mga ICU, pinapadecongest natin ang mga ospital dito sa mga mild at asymptomatic at ililipat po sila sa mga step-down facilities. Hindi naman po para tanggihan ng kahit na sinong pasyente sa ating mga ospital, i-redirect lang po sila. That's why we are asking local governments and also our hospital facilities to have a navigation system para po natin na i-refer sa appropriate facility ang ating mga pasyente at malaman ng mga pasyenteng mild and asymptomatic that they can also be taken care of in our lower facilities, hindi na kailangan sa mga matataas na ospital. Wala, katulad ng lagi naming sinasabi, Yusek Rocky, mula nung umpisa, bagamat hindi pa natin ma-officially declare na may community transmission sa ating bansa, we are now acting as if there is really community transmission. Dahil nakikita na ho natin yung epekto na mabilis na tumataas sa mga kaso. Nakikita rin po natin na hindi na lang po sa isang parte ng bansa, ngunit maraming parte na po ng bansa. So we are now actioning or giving actions as if there is already community transmission.
Meanwhile, nearly half of the total number of overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs in Hong Kong, has been vaccinated. That according to the Philippine Overseas Labor Office, or Paulo, reporting this on Friday. Labor Attaché Melchor Dizon said out of the 220,000 Filipinos working on the island, more than 100,000 have received the vaccine against COVID-19. Now, he also noted that Hong Kong has enough supplies of the COVID-19 jabs. At the same time, Dizon also reported that the government is giving incentives to those who will get vaccinated. He said for residents, they are giving away like a house, a car, a certain amount, but they have a draw that will start maybe next month for the raffle, where Filipinos are qualified to join the raffle, except for the house prize. The majority of Filipino workers in Hong Kong are household service workers.
In other news, Thai police fired tear gas and rubber bullets at hundreds of protesters in Bangkok, demanding political reform and calling for a change to the country's coronavirus vaccination program. Now, demonstrators defied restrictions on public gatherings introduced as Thailand battles its worst outbreak of the virus, call for Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha to quit. The Thai government has come under fire for the sluggish rollout of its COVID-19 vaccination program. The protesters also demanded it start using mRNA shots such as Pfizer and Moderna rather than China's Sinovac. The 500 or so protesters were vastly outnumbered by police, who said Friday they plan to deploy nearly 6,000 officers to tackle the rally. A youth-led street protest movement for democracy rose up last year and at its peak drew tens of thousands to rallies in Bangkok. Now the demonstrators called for the resignation of Prayut, the former army chief who came to power in a 2014 coup, as well as changes to the military-scripted constitution. But the most shocking calls were for changes to the monarchy, a long-revered institution in Thailand protected by some of the world's toughest lèse-majesté laws.
Staying in Thailand, the morgue workers there are battling exhaustion as the kingdom's latest COVID-19 wave hits new highs and the death toll mounts. At Thammasat University Hospital, north of Bangkok, staff have had to rent a special container to store the bodies after the morgue filled up. Take a look.
คือมันอาจจะไม่ใช่ด่านหน้าที่แบบจะต้องเจอคนไข้ที่ยังมีชีวิตแต่เราคือด่านสุดท้ายแล้วนะคือเราต้องช่วยเหลือเขาอะศพมันจะมีทั้งศพด้านข้างในกับข้างนอกเข้ามาเพราะฉะนั้นมันทำให้ปริมาณศพที่จะเก็บในตู้เย็นมาค่อนข้างล้นแล้วก็จะทำให้มีคอนเทนเนอร์ขึ้นมา
ศพที่เข้ามาเป็นศพที่มีความเสี่ยงนะคะเราก็จะทำการสวอปก็คือเพื่อตรวจหาเชื้อโควิดก่อนนะคะซึ่งโดยปกติที่ตรวจเนี่ยจะใช้เวลาประมาณ1 วันนะคะถึงจะทราบผลเนี่ยศพที่ตรวจส่งไปเนี่ยเราก็จะเก็บเอาไว้ก่อน
Now, the government has imposed severe curbs on daily life in dozens of provinces, including Bangkok, as it battles to contain the outbreak fueled by the highly contagious Delta variant of the virus. Bars, swimming pools, museums, and other public venues have been closed. Strict limits placed on shopping malls and restaurants, and a 7-hour nighttime curfew imposed. But so far, the measures have not slowed the spread, with 20,920 new cases announced on Thursday, taking the total since the start of the pandemic to almost 700,000.
In other news, Australia's 3 largest cities were in lockdown as New South Wales recorded 319 community cases of the virus and 5 more deaths, a third straight day of record case numbers. The leader of Melbourne's Victoria State, Daniel Andrews, comments on the current coronavirus outbreak. Take a look.
Very, very significant to see this many cases, although they are all linked, but they are linked to 2 outbreaks, and we don't know where those 2 outbreaks started. So there are mystery cases that sit behind this. The cases we've found since are linked to others that we knew, but they've been out in the community, and there's every reason. In fact, there is a certainty that there are more cases out there. That's why getting tested when you've got any symptoms at all is so important. If we don't follow these rules, then we will, through our own choices, we will drive cases up. That's not what we want. That's not how we get through this and get open again. It's in fact how if we make bad choices, the wrong choices, it's how we all play a part in keeping the place closed. We don't want that. So please, I know everyone wants to visit loved ones and friends and family in their homes. You just can't do that. You just cannot do that. This Delta variant spreads so fast. We look up in Sydney today, 5 people who have lost their lives. I think some of those are in their 60s. We saw just this week a gentleman in his 20s. This will go where the vaccine isn't. We don't have enough people vaccinated. We'll finish up with younger people in hospital, otherwise fit and healthy people. Our system will be overrun if we don't bring this under control.
A lack of supply and pockets of vaccine hesitancy has throttled efforts to immunize Australians, with just over 20% of the population fully vaccinated. The nation managed to avoid the worst of the pandemic for the past 18 months, but the effectiveness of its COVID-0 policy had been called into question as lockdowns struggled to stamp out the highly infectious Delta variant.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. CJ and I will be back right after this break.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Hindi makukumpleto ang kada umaga ng walang mainit at masarap na kape. Subalit ngayong may ECQ, karamihan sa mga nasa establishmento na ating iniinuman ng masarap na kape ay sarado rin. MSMEs again are affected by the lockdowns. Small businesses should continue learning new strategies, including keeping up with the digitalization to survive the pandemic. In this episode, we will be given tips on how to remain persistent amidst the trials and challenges we, including our businesses, face. With our guest, Mr. Eric Lim, the COO of Conlin's Coffee.
You have to find the right partners. Part of finding your partners is the same thing what your customers are looking for: consistency, reliability, and quality.
All these, this episode of Open for Business.
Welcome back. 9 people were wounded, one of them seriously on Friday in a stabbing attack on a commuter train in Tokyo, with the suspect later handing himself in after fleeing the scene, according to local media. The stabbings took place on an evening train in Setagaya Ward in the west of the city. One woman in her 20s sustained serious back injuries, according to public broadcaster NHK, citing emergency response officials. The site is several kilometers from the venue of the Olympic equestrian events. The train was brought to an emergency stop after the rail operator was alerted, and a knife and mobile phone believed to belong to the suspect were found on board. The male suspect, also in his 20s, was reportedly taken in by police after he turned himself in at a nearby convenience store, telling the manager he was the perpetrator of the attack. Violent crime is rare in Japan, and the attack comes with the capital on heightened alert as it hosts the Olympic Games. Japan has strict gun laws, but there are occasional violent crimes involving other weapons. In 2019, a man killed 2 people, including a schoolgirl, and wounded more than a dozen in a rampage that targeted children as they waited for a bus. In 2018, a man was arrested in central Japan after stabbing 1 person to death and injuring 2 others aboard a bullet train.
In Afghanistan now, where the Taliban have captured their second provincial capital in a fast-moving offensive. They captured Shevargan city in Jowzjan, and the deputy governor said that the second provincial capital to fall to the insurgents in less than 24 hours. A UN special envoy demanded the Taliban end its assaults. Take a look.
Afghanistan is now at a dangerous turning point. Ahead lies either a genuine peace negotiation or a tragically intertwined set of crises. An increasingly brutal conflict combined with an acute humanitarian situation and multiplying human rights abuses.
We informed the Council about grave human rights violations in Afghanistan happening. We see the Taliban in area they're capturing, their summary killings, executions, as well as chopping of hands, stoning to death, and very egregious, the graphic of which would be very difficult to even show here to the media.
The U.S. envoy spoke from Kabul, where the Taliban assassinated the Afghan government's immediate chief. Insurgents entered Zaranj, a city of 50,000 people in Nimruz province. Fierce fighting also continued in the capital of Helmand province. Fighting in Afghanistan's long-running conflict has intensified since May, when foreign forces began the final stage of a withdrawal due to be completed later this month.
The World Food Program, or WFP, warned that it is facing a 70% funding shortfall in Myanmar, where millions face growing food insecurity. Take a look.
The people of Myanmar are going through their most difficult time in memory. They've been faced with multiple challenges, multiple shocks. First of all, poverty. Of course, poverty predated the current situation, and then, of course, since the 1 February military takeover, there's been increased political unrest, as also an economic crisis. COVID-19, we had a very tough second wave last year, which had a devastating impact on people's livelihoods. And now the third wave is it's practically like a tsunami that's hit this country. It's hitting all aspects and creating major havoc. The WFP has tried to launch a large-scale assistance to people who we believe are in very high need. In critical need in urban areas, in the poorest parts of the urban. And we started in Yangon, and we've assisted approximately 750,000 people so far. But we believe that about 2 million people should be targeted with emergency food assistance. And really, to really sum it up, we do need the support and attention of the international community now more than ever.
In April, the UN agency estimated that the number of people facing hunger could more than double to 6.2 million in the next 6 months, up from 2.8 million prior to February. Subsequent monitoring surveys carried out by WFP have shown that since February, more and more families are being pushed to the edge, struggling to put even the most basic food on the table. WFP says a major wave of COVID infections is surging through Myanmar, compounding hunger, rising food and fuel prices, political unrest, violence, and displacement. Myanmar has been in chaos and its economy paralyzed since the military seized power from civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi on February 1.
In other news, the UK has launched an insurance scheme to cover music festivals and other live events as cushion from COVID uncertainty. We have Nicole Salenga for that story. Nicole.
The UK has launched an insurance scheme to cover music festivals and other live events as the beleaguered sector seeks protection after months of mass cancellations due to the coronavirus pandemic. The scheme, worth £750 million or $1 billion, and announced by the country's finance ministry late Thursday, follows pressure from organizers and venues for the government to provide a cushion from COVID uncertainty. The Live Events Reinsurance Scheme, created in partnership with UK-based Lloyd's Insurance Company, will run from September 2021 until the end of September 2022 to avoid a third summer of cancellations at events such as music festivals. Finance Minister Rishi Sunak admitted while organizers are eager to go following the lifting of most major restrictions, the lack of the right kind of insurance is proving a problem. As the economy reopens, I want to do everything I can to help events providers and small businesses plan with confidence right through to next year, he added. Jamie Njoku Goodwin, Chief Executive of the industry organization UK Music, said he had warned the government of the catastrophic impact of the market failure in insurance for live events. This new government scheme is therefore incredibly welcome news, not just for the millions of music fans who have been looking forward to the return of live events, but also for the tens of thousands of musicians and crew members, he added. While England removed virtually all coronavirus restrictions last month, most major festivals were forced to cancel or reduce crowd sizes well in advance because of the long lead times required for the large events. The Glastonbury Festival, held on a dairy farm in Somerset, southwest England, announced it would cancel for the second year in a row as the third lockdown began in January. The festival live-streamed a concert to fans in May instead. Other festivals directly cited the lack of a government insurance scheme as they had to refund tickets during the emergence of a new, more transmissible Delta variant of the virus. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, I am Nicole Salenga. We live in interesting times.
And to the U.S., a greater number of American children are being swept up in a wave of coronavirus infections driven by the Delta variant, causing renewed anxiety for parents and a bitter political fight as schools prepare to reopen within weeks. Much of the surge is concentrated in the southeastern state of Florida, where some school districts are defying an order by the Republican governor forbidding mask mandates. In the latest political twist in the health crisis, take a look.
I'm 12. With this thing, it's crazy with COVID, and since now they got the vaccine, it's getting a bit better.
You can't tell someone that, hey, like, don't go to school right now because of COVID. Like, that's not really ideal. But at the same time, like, if you do choose to go to school, you're gonna be paying all this money in tuition to not have the same experience. You know, you're getting a lot taken away from you, and it's not the school's fault. It's just the reality of the times we're in. So it's hard. It's very hard.
The majority of children who catch the coronavirus will have a mild or asymptomatic disease, and until recently, they had not been a major focal point of the pandemic. That's now changing with Delta, a variant that is as contagious as chickenpox and largely drove 72,000 pediatric cases in the week leading up to July 29, according to a new study by the American Academy of Pediatrics, a figure 5 times higher than in late June. Nearly 20,000 of those cases were in Florida, according to state data. The Sunshine State is also experiencing the highest number of hospitalizations for minors in the country, currently 143, which is ahead of Texas.
Meanwhile, protesters took to the streets across France for the 4th weekend in a row to rally against a new health pass needed to enter a cafe or travel on an intercity train 2 days before the new rules come into force. The new rules, championed by President Emmanuel Macron, make it obligatory to have either a full course of vaccination against COVID-19, be in possession of a negative test, or be recently recovered from the virus to enjoy usually routine activities. Macron, who faces re-election next year, hopes the new rules will encourage all French to be vaccinated against COVID-19 and defeat the virus and its fast-spreading Delta variant. But opponents who have turned out en masse in the streets in the past weeks argue that the rules encroach on civil liberties in a country where individual freedom is prized. The pass has already been required since July 21st to visit cultural venues such as cinemas, theaters, and museums. Its extension was approved by France's Constitutional Council on Thursday.
In other news, NASA's Perseverance drilled into the surface of Mars but failed in its initial attempt to collect rock samples that would be picked up by future missions for analysis by scientists on Earth. The U.S. Space Agency published images on Friday of a small mound with a hole in its center next to the rover, the first ever dug into the red planet by a robot. But data sent to Earth by the rover after its first attempt to collect a sample and seal it in a tube indicated no rock had been gathered. Thomas Zerpican, Associate Administrator for NASA's Science Mission Directorate, in a statement said, quote, "I am confident we have the right team working on this, and we will persevere toward a solution to ensure future success," unquote. Scientists also hope to better understand Martian geology. The mission took off from Florida a little over a year ago, and Perseverance, which is the size of a large family car, landed on February 18 in the Jezero crater. Scientists believe the crater contained a deep lake where the conditions may have been able to support extraterrestrial life.
Eagle News will be back with more stories. Please don't go away.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Ulo. Sa ilalim ng dagat ay sisisig. Ang tahong ay hahanguin. At ang kita ay palalaguin.
Para ka kumita, sisipagan mo, tapos konting kapitalo, magpopondo ka para meron kang hanguin, meron kang makuha pagdating ng oras. Mga 6 months, 3 months, pabalik na yung puhunan mo.
Kesa sa itapon, kailangan natin siyang i-recycle para mapakinabangan.
Iba't ibang sangkap ay lutuin. Putahing di kayang limutin. Ako po si Robin Padilla at ito po ang Vlog. Kaagapay sa hanap buhay. Kaagapay sa hanap buhay.
Welcome back. An economist forecasts a 10.9% growth for the Philippine economy for the second quarter of 2021, a big reversal from the decade's low minus 16.9% the same period last year. In a report, ING Bank Manila senior economist Nicolas Mapa said that while the year-on-year print is projected to be an expansion, he forecasts the quarter-on-quarter figure to be at minus 1.5%, which is better than the minus 4.2% in the first 3 months of this year. All sectors, he said, are expected to post growth led by capital formation, government spending, and household consumption. The Philippine Statistics Authority is scheduled to report the 2021 second quarter print on August 10.
In other news, a new draft law introduced in the Senate in Uruguay could regulate cryptocurrency transactions and also legalize cryptocurrency as an accepted payment method in the country. If approved, the draft proposed by Senator Juan Sartori would also introduce licenses for virtual asset service providers, or VASPs, that would be issued by the government, classifying them into 3 different groups. Proposed by Uruguayan Senator Juan Sartori, the draft law establishes permits and licenses for institutions and virtual asset service providers. Now, if that's approved, Senaclaft would be responsible for maintaining a level of vigilance over cryptocurrency exchanges. Senaclaft is the national money laundering watchdog. In its 5th article, the crypto asset law, as it has been called, announces the legality of cryptocurrency for payment, but the proposal falls short of declaring Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies as legal tender like El Salvador did on June 9.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Ako po si Ronnie, isa po ako sa nawalan ng trabaho ngayong pandemya. Sobrang hirap, ma'am, lalo na nagkaroon ng pandemic. Di mo alam kung saan ka pupunta o saan ka kukuha ng kakainin mo. Ayan po, yan, dito rin kami dati nakatira. Nagkaroon ng pandemic, lumipat po sa kabila. Kung ibang tao nga, nahihirapan, may trabaho. Ako pa kaya... Ito po yung bahay ko na Tinaglipatan ko mula Pidukos hanggang dito. Nagkaroon po siya ng ECQ, ma'am. Hanggang sa nahirapan na kami, nawalan na kami ng hanap buhay. Simpleng tao lang naman ako eh. Bata pa ako, ba't bibigyan mo akong ganitong trabaho? Bigyan mo akong karanasan ng ganitong buhay.
Welcome back. Jeremy Lin has tested positive for COVID-19 and is now receiving treatment in Shanghai. The former NBA guard and first Asian American to win an NBA title said in a social media post today. Lin announced in June he was rejoining the Chinese Basketball Association's Beijing Ducks after a failed NBA comeback. He tested positive for coronavirus on his third day in quarantine after flying to Shanghai from San Francisco. The 32-year-old posted on Chinese social network Weibo. He said, "I was shocked and a little bewildered," he wrote on his initial reaction to the diagnosis. Lin, who said he had been vaccinated in the United States and tested negative for coronavirus multiple times before traveling to China, was unsure when he had contracted COVID-19. The athlete said he was receiving treatment in Shanghai and was showing light symptoms.
NBA All-Star Kevin Durant hailed his team for overcoming adversity after pouring in a game-high 29 points to lead the United States past France 87-82 for a beautiful fourth straight Olympic men's basketball gold medal. Now, the Americans started slowly but earned a 22-18 lead after the first quarter and were 44-39 ahead at halfway, then survived some nervous late moments to prove the doubters wrong. Greg Popovich's men had headed to Tokyo after defeats to Nigeria and Australia in lead-up exhibition matches, sparking questions around their global dominance. They then crashed to seventh ranked France in their opening group game, their first defeat at an Olympics since the 2004 edition in Athens. But spearheaded by Durant, they steadied the ship and began gelling with a French team led by NBA stars Rudy Gobert, Evan Fournier, and Nicolas Batum, unable to repeat their feat in the final. Durant was once again the U.S. backbone as he joined Carmelo Anthony as a three-time title winner after being part of the triumphant teams in 2012 and 2016.
In boxing, Britain's Galil Yafai defeated Carlo Paalam to win the Olympic Flyweight title today, denying the Philippines a first boxing gold medal in the country's history. Now, the men's middleweight final produced a shock as Ukrainian top seed Alexander Kishniak was knocked out in the third round of his bout by Brazil's Herbert Souza. The 28-year-old Yafai, a former car factory worker won on split points in an enthralling contest against Paalam to earn Britain's first boxing gold in Tokyo. Yafai, cheered on from the stands by his British teammates, many of them with the country's flag draped over the shoulders, had the Filipino down in the first round of the scheduled three after an incisive three-punch combination. Paalam was always playing catch-up after that against Yafai, whose two older brothers are both professional boxers. Britain, who like the Philippines have a proud boxing history, have now won 1 gold, 2 silvers, and 2 bronze in the sport in the Japanese capital.
Meanwhile, Perez, Jeff Chirchir, secured back-to-back women's Olympic marathon titles for Kenya, timing 2 hours, 27 minutes, and 20 seconds. The 27-year-old two-time half-marathon world champion beat compatriot and world record holder Brigid Kosgei with 2 hours, 27 minutes, and 36 seconds, whilst the USA's Molly Seidel was third with 2 hours, 27 minutes, and 46 seconds. Jeff Cheer succeeds disgraced fellow Kenyan Jemima Samgong, who won in 2016 in Rio to become Kenya's first female marathon champion. However, she tested positive for the endurance booster EPO in 2017, leading to an 8-year doping ban. Organizers, wary of the hot and humid conditions, had announced on the eve of the race the start time had been brought forward an hour to 6 a.m. local time. 2 hours into the race, the temperature had risen to 30.6 degrees Celsius or 87 degrees Fahrenheit with 63% humidity. Jeep Churchers agreed the conditions had been grueling.
And China proved its Olympic diving dominance once again as Cao Yuan took gold in the individual 10-meter platform, with teammate Yang Jian scooping the silver. Bronze went to Britain's Tom Daley. Cao and Yang were dominant through most of the 10-meter platform competition, taking the 2 top spots in both qualifiers and semifinals. Cao, 26, becomes the first athlete to win gold in all 3 diving disciplines, having taken the 3-meter springboard top spot in Rio and the 10-meter synchronized in London.
And Philippine boxer Carlo Paalam lost his Olympic boxing final today, but said he still treasured his silver medal because the recycled metal reminded him how far he has come since his days as a scavenger. Now, the 23-year-old who was vying to become the first Olympic boxing champion from the Philippines was edged out for flyweight gold by Britain's Galil Yafai. But Paalam, who grew up in poverty and scavenged from a landfill site to earn money as a child, refused to be downcast. The silver medal, he said, symbolizes what I went through because when I was a young boy, I was a scavenger and I collected junk and garbage, he said. He also said, I know this medal is made out of recycled materials and I can identify with it because it is also made from waste material and garbage. The 28-year-old Yafai, a former car factory worker, had the Filipino down in the first round of the scheduled 3 after an incisive 3-punch combination. Paalam was always playing catch-up after that against Yafai, whose 2 older brothers are both professional boxers. That was the changing point, said Paalam, who has described himself as a mere child of the streets. If not for the knockdown, I could have made a fight of it, but credit to my opponent, he said. I had a game plan to pressure him, to cut the ring off, and to trap him. But I got hit by a solid shot, and I tried to recover. I got up and tried to make a fight of it, but he had my number, he said. Despite the disappointment for Paalam, the Philippines have enjoyed a breakthrough games in the boxing ring, with Nesty Petesio winning women's featherweight silver and Yumir Marshall taking men's middleweight bronze.
And finally, in our news, from a group of athletes struggling to take that elusive Olympic gold, the Philippines is just a formality away from walking away as the best in Southeast Asia. The Philippine team to this year's Tokyo Olympics is set to end its campaign as the top-performing country among Southeast Asian nations in terms of which medals they won. Indonesia actually had more medals won than the Philippines as of 4:30 p.m. today, but with Carlo Paalam already formalizing his top 2 finish in the men's flyweight boxing event earlier in the day, the Philippines will go up the medal tally. The 28-person Indonesian squad, which wrapped up its campaign earlier this week, got 1 gold from the women's badminton doubles tandem of Gracia Polly and Apriani Rahayu, 1 silver from male weightlifter Iko Irawan, and 3 bronzes from men's badminton star Anthony Ginting and weightlifters Erwin Abdullah and Wendy Aisa. However, Paalam gave the Philippines its 2nd silver medal medal for the year, enough to overtake Indonesia in the medal tally despite only getting 4 medals, including 1 gold in total. Heidelin Diaz won it all in the women's weightlifting event, while the boxing team amassed the bulk of the medals, 2 silvers from Paalam and Nesty Petesio and a bronze from Yumir Marshall. Congratulations to our Philippine team.
Yes, I'm so excited for the Asian Games and Paris 2024.
Yes.
And that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy weekend, everyone. I'm TJ Hero. We'll see you again on Monday.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back next week. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.